person you've ever loved, every place you've ever been, every dream I want you to stop for a moment and imagine something with me. Imagine that every single person you've ever loved, every place you've ever been, every dream you've ever had, isn't actually separate from you at all. Imagine that right now, in this very moment, you are connected to absolutely everything in the universe through invisible threads of energy that science is only just beginning to understand. And imagine that you've always had the power to pull on these threads, to send signals across space and time, to change your reality from the inside out, but nobody ever told you how. For over 40 years, I worked with thousands of people in the deepest states of consciousness you can imagine, and what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about reality. I'm talking about real quantum entanglement, not the watered-down version you might have heard about, but the kind that actually exists between your consciousness and the universe itself. And today, I'm going to share with you the exact method that unlocked abilities in ordinary people that seemed absolutely impossible until they weren't. You see, I spent decades as a hypnotherapist, taking people into states of awareness so deep that they could access memories from before they were born, communicate with parts of themselves that exist outside of time, and tap into a field of infinite intelligence that connects every living thing. And in session after session, year after year, I kept seeing the same pattern emerge. When people finally understood how to work with quantum entanglement at the consciousness level, their entire lives transformed. Health conditions that doctors called incurable suddenly healed. Relationships that seemed broken beyond repair spontaneously mended. Opportunities that appeared impossible materialized out of thin air. And the most beautiful part? None of it was magic. It was physics. It was the natural result of understanding how consciousness actually works in a quantum universe. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be wondering if this is too complicated, too scientific, too far outside your understanding. But here's what I learned after working with everyone from farmers to physicians, from school teachers to CEOs. The people who got the most profound results weren't the ones with advanced degrees in physics. They were the ones who could feel the truth of what I'm about to share with you. The ones who trusted their own inner knowing more than they trusted the limiting stories they'd been told about reality. What I'm going to walk you through today isn't theory. This is practical, tested, real-world application of quantum principles that I watched transform thousands of lives. And the most important thing you need to know before we go any deeper is this. You already have everything you need inside you right now. Your consciousness is already entangled with everything in the universe. You've just been using it unconsciously, randomly, without direction. Today, that changes. Let me tell you something that most people never hear. Science has proven that when two particles become entangled at the quantum level, they remain connected no matter how far apart they are. Change one, and the other changes instantly, faster than the speed of light, across any distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because it seemed to violate everything we thought we knew about how the universe works. But here's what scientists are only beginning to whisper about in their laboratories, what I saw proven thousands of times in my practice. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. Your awareness, your intention, your focused attention creates entanglement with whatever you observe, whatever you think about, whatever you emotionally connect with. And once that entanglement is established, you have the power to influence outcomes in ways that will seem absolutely miraculous until you understand the mechanism behind them. I discovered this not in a laboratory, but in the sacred space of deep hypnosis, where the conscious mind finally gets quiet enough to let the quantum mind speak. Session after session, I watched people access states of awareness where they could see the threads of connection between themselves and everything else. They could see how their thoughts sent ripples across the quantum field. They could see how their emotions created magnetic attraction or repulsion. They could see how their beliefs literally structured the reality they experienced. And most importantly, they learned how to work with these quantum connections deliberately, consciously, powerfully. This isn't about positive thinking or manifestation techniques that leave you feeling frustrated when they don't work. This is about understanding the actual mechanics of consciousness in a quantum universe and learning to operate in alignment with those mechanics instead of against them. Because here's the truth that changed everything for me and for the thousands of people I worked with. You are not a small, separate, powerless being living in a big, indifferent universe. You are a quantum consciousness with the power to entangle with and influence the entire field of reality itself. You've just never been taught how to use that power intentionally. Now, before I share the specific technique that unlocks this ability, I need you to understand something crucial about how this actually works. Because if you miss this piece, you'll end up trying to manipulate reality from your conscious mind, and that never works. The secret isn't in your thinking mind. It's in the part of you that exists beyond thought, beyond time, beyond the illusion of separation. And accessing that part of yourself is simpler than you've been led to believe. Are you ready to understand how you've been entangled with your reality all along? And how to finally use that entanglement consciously? Because what I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you thought you knew about who you are and what you're capable of. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Your life will never be the same. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's begin this journey together into the quantum nature of your own magnificent consciousness. When I first stumbled onto this understanding, I wasn't looking for it. I was simply doing my work as a hypnotherapist, helping people stop smoking, lose weight, overcome fears, the usual things. But I had developed a technique that took people deeper than traditional hypnosis into what I call the somnambulistic state, where the conscious mind completely steps aside and something else, something vast and wise and unlimited, comes forward to speak. In these sessions, people would start telling me things that seemed impossible. They would describe lives they'd lived in other times, other places, other bodies. They would speak with wisdom that seemed far beyond their everyday awareness. They would access information about their current life circumstances that they had no conscious way of knowing. And most fascinating to me, they would describe the actual structure of reality itself in ways that perfectly matched what quantum physicists were discovering in their laboratories. One woman I worked with, I'll call her Sarah, came to me with a health condition that had baffled her doctors for years. In our session, when she was in that deep state, she suddenly said something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "I can see the thread connecting my body to my mother's fear. Every time she worries about me, it pulls on this thread and my body responds with symptoms. It's like we're entangled, and her emotion becomes my physical experience." Now, this was years before most people were even talking about quantum entanglement outside of physics journals. But Sarah...
هاي 1900 I should speak in English. In 1996, I developed mild stroke, which stopped me from swallowing and talking. And I was working in Hamad Medical Corporation in Doha, Qatar. And of course, it is a story. But then when they communicated with me from Baghdad, that morning my mother was sitting in the garden and crying. So they asked her why. She said there is something wrong with Samira. And this is a true story. And I couldn't understand it. And in the same day, when I was preparing my thing to go to the hospital, my brother in London, he didn't ring me for years. He rang me. He wanted something to give a decision about something. So I was surprised, but then I couldn't talk to him because I couldn't speak. So I was talking through the receiver. I have to talk, and I'm going to the intensive care unit. Like this. So he stopped, and he said, go. He stopped. But then he stopped. He rang my elder brother in Germany. My brother rang the other brother. And my brother rang my son. And they start to communicate so that what they can do to help me. And then in the evening, I did not ring my brother in Germany. In the evening, I admit myself because my movement was okay. And then he phoned me. And he said, if you can hear me, knock on the receiver once. If you can't, then knock twice. So he was talking and I was responding in these signals. Then he said, I will send you the most precious gift. So I asked, why? What? He said, no, it is a surprise. Apparently he rang my son and arranged for him the ticket and gave him money because he was studying in Europe. And then he came. And then my brother came. So now I'm very happy to understanding that there is a quantum entanglement. And so many times I think of somebody and then they phone me or send me a message. It happened many times. And during my medical practice, I noticed when I am in the flow with a patient, they get better. I feel I have positive energy, honestly, God. But I don't know what. And so many people, when I speak, they are affected and they change their lives. So one Iraqi lady, she said, you are the best thing happened to me. I said, how come? She said, yes, you changed my life. I start intermittent fasting. I start to do yogurt with Lactobacillus reuteri. You changed my mind. And my mind was foggy. Now it is very clear. And I have so much energy that her boss, who employ her, he said, I have many doing accountant, but now perhaps you are the one, I will keep you. You are equal to all of them because she got so much energy. And this happened across life. So now I am very, of course, I read the physics, Newtonian physics and relativity theory by Einstein and quantum physics and quantum biology for years. It's not now. So when I look after my videos, I look to this and I choose it. So I will decided to spend 1 hour of my morning to listen to this. So I thought, why should I listen to it alone? I'm entangled with my subscribers and let them understand and get the benefit. And if it is difficult, they will comment and then I will do it in a very simple way. Because knowledge, when you listen to it first time, you can't get it all. It looks like if you are English, as if you are listening to Mandarin. And especially medicine or medical language, it is also difficult. So I use the time to get benefit and to benefit the subscriber. And also to use the time to put near infrared light, which is this one. It has 2 wavelengths, which is 650 nanometer an 850 nanometer to help my palm because I have numbness following a fracture of the radius bone on 16th of December 2024. Until now, it did not heal. So I'm listening, perhaps if I give love and compassion to my palm, which I didn't do, perhaps it will be cured because there is entanglement, quantum entanglement, which is now the labs and the scientists talking about it. And let us listen.
In this deep state of awareness was describing exactly what quantum physics says happens when particles become entangled. They become one system, not two separate things. And what affects one instantly affects the other, regardless of distance or time. I started paying closer attention in my sessions after that. And I began to notice that everyone, when they got deep enough, could perceive these connections, these threads of entanglement between themselves and other people, between themselves and places, between themselves and their own possible futures. It was like they were seeing the actual quantum structure of reality, the invisible web that connects everything to everything else. But here's what really changed my understanding. These people weren't just observing these connections, they were learning to work with them. They were learning to consciously adjust their own vibration, their own frequency, in ways that changed the entire entangled system. Sarah, for example, learned to send a different signal through that thread connecting her to her mother. Instead of receiving fear and responding with symptoms, she learned to send love and coherence back through the connection, which actually changed her mother's worry and simultaneously healed her own body. Within 3 months, her condition completely resolved, and her doctors had no explanation for it. This is what I mean by the simple quantum entanglement trick. It's not about trying to control other people or manipulate outcomes. It's about understanding that you are already entangled with everything in your life, and you're already sending signals through those connections every single moment. You're just doing it unconsciously, based on your fears, your conditioning, your unexamined beliefs. The trick is learning to do it consciously, intentionally, from your highest state of awareness. Let me explain this in a way that makes it completely practical and usable for you. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, you are entangled with me. Your consciousness and mine have formed a connection through your attention. That's how quantum entanglement works at the consciousness level. Attention creates connection. Focus creates entanglement. And once that entanglement exists, information and energy can flow both ways. This is why you've probably had the experience of thinking about someone and then they call you. You were already entangled with them through your past connection, and your thought about them sent a signal through that entanglement that they picked up on some level, and they responded by reaching out. This happens all the time, but most people dismiss it as coincidence because they don't understand the quantum mechanics behind it. Now imagine understanding this so deeply that you could use it intentionally. Imagine knowing exactly how to create entanglement with the opportunities you want, the healing you need, the relationships you desire. Imagine being able to send clear, coherent signals through the quantum field that would draw to you exactly what you need for your highest evolution and greatest joy. This is not imagination. This is documented, repeatable, scientifically consistent reality, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. But first, you need to understand the 3 quantum principles that make this work, because if you try to apply this technique without understanding these principles, you'll just be going through motions without accessing the real power. These principles came through to me session after session, year after year, spoken by the higher consciousness of ordinary people who accessed extraordinary states of awareness, and every single one of them aligns perfectly with what quantum physics tells us about the nature of reality. The first principle is this: consciousness is primary. Reality doesn't create consciousness. Consciousness creates reality. This is the hardest thing for people raised in a materialist worldview to accept, but it's absolutely fundamental to quantum physics. The observer effect, which has been proven in laboratory after laboratory, shows that the act of observation literally changes what is being observed at the quantum level. Particles exist in a state of infinite possibility until consciousness observes them, and then they collapse into a specific reality. Your consciousness isn't a byproduct of your brain chemistry. Your brain chemistry is a result of your consciousness. You are not a body that happens to be aware. You are awareness that has temporarily taken the form of a body. The second principle: everything is energy and all energy is connected. Quantum field theory shows us that what appears to be empty space is actually a field of pure potential, vibrating with energy at every possible frequency. Particles aren't really separate little things. They're excitations in this field, waves in an ocean of energy that encompasses everything. You are not separate from this field. You are made of this field. Your thoughts are vibrations in this field. Your emotions are vibrations in this field. And because it's all one connected field, every vibration you send out ripples through the entire system, affecting everything according to the principle of resonance. The third principle: time is an illusion created by consciousness. Quantum physics shows us that at the fundamental level of reality, past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. What we experience as the flow of time is actually our consciousness moving through different points in this eternal now. This is why people in deep hypnosis can access past lives, why they can see probable futures, why they can receive information from outside the time stream. They're not doing anything supernatural. They're simply accessing the quantum reality that exists beyond the illusion of linear time. These three principles: consciousness is primary, everything is connected, and time is an illusion. These are the foundation of the quantum entanglement technique that unlocked hidden abilities in thousands of my clients. And once you really understand these principles, not just intellectually, but in your bones, the technique becomes natural, obvious, and incredibly powerful. Now let me tell you about another person who used this understanding to create what everyone around him called a miracle. His name was Michael, and he came to me after losing everything in a business failure. He was depressed, broke, and convinced that his life was over. He was 53 years old, and he couldn't see any way forward. But in our sessions together, something remarkable happened. When Michael went into that deep state, he accessed a part of himself that saw his current situation completely differently. This higher aspect of his consciousness told him that his business failure wasn't an ending. It was a quantum collapse of an old timeline that was no longer aligned with his highest path. By losing everything, he had been freed from a future that would have led him away from his true purpose. And now, in this moment of 0 point, he had the opportunity to consciously entangle with an entirely different timeline, one that had always existed in potential but that he couldn't access while he was locked into the old pattern. This is one of the most powerful things I learned through all my years of this work. When everything falls apart in your life, you're not being punished. The universe isn't trying to destroy you. You're being offered a doorway. You're being given the rare opportunity to step outside the loop of repetition and choose differently. Most people, when they reach this 0 point, they panic. They scramble to rebuild what fell apart as quickly as possible. They rush back into the familiar, even if the familiar was suffocating them. Why? Because the unknown is terrifying. The mind craves certainty more than it craves truth. It would rather have a painful pattern it understands than face the vast openness of possibility. But Thomas didn't do that, and this is where his healing truly began. He sat in the rubble of his life and he asked a different question, not, how do I get back to normal? But what if normal was the problem? What if I was never meant to fit into that life at all? I watched something shift in his energy field during that session. The constriction around his solar plexus began to dissolve. The heavy, dense energy that had been sitting there for lifetimes started to move. And as it moved, memories surfaced, not just from this lifetime, but from others. He saw himself in different bodies, different times, always playing out the same theme, sacrificing his own truths to meet someone else's expectations. He saw a life as a woman in Victorian England, married off to secure her family status, dying with songs still trapped in her throat. He saw himself as a young man in ancient Greece, trained to be a warrior when his soul longed to be a healer, killed in a battle he never believed in. The details changed, but the pattern was identical. The soul kept returning, trying to learn the same lesson, that your truth is not negotiable. And here's what most people don't understand about past life patterns. They're not just historical curiosities. They're active energy signatures running in your present day life right now. I've seen this over and over again in sessions. A woman comes to me because she can't maintain long-term relationships. Every partnership ends at around the 3-year mark, like clockwork. During regression, we discover a life where she was forced into an arranged marriage that lasted exactly 3 years before her spouse died in battle. The grief was so overwhelming, she made a soul-level decision. Never again will I let someone get that close. Never again will I experience that depth of loss. That decision wasn't made consciously in this lifetime, but it's operating like a program running in the background of her psyche, sabotaging every relationship that approaches that danger zone. Her conscious mind wants love, commitment, partnership, but that ancient program is stronger, protecting her from a pain she doesn't even consciously remember. Or consider the man who came to me with an inexplicable phobia of water, not just discomfort, absolute terror. He couldn't take baths, avoided pools, would panic driving over bridges. No traumatic event in this life explained it. But under hypnosis, he remembered drowning in a past life as a sailor, trapped below deck as his ship went down. The sheer panic of that death was so intense, it imprinted on his soul. And now, centuries later, his body still remembers what his mind has forgotten. These aren't metaphors. These aren't psychological projections. These are actual memories stored in what I call the soul's database, influencing your choices, your fears, your attractions and repulsions in ways you've never consciously understood. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Sometimes these patterns aren't about trauma at all. Sometimes they're about unfinished missions, incomplete purposes that your soul is still trying to fulfill. I worked with a teacher who felt an almost obsessive drive to educate children in underserved communities. It wasn't just passion, it was compulsion. She couldn't explain why she'd sacrificed financial security, personal relationships, everything to pursue this work. During regression, she remembered being a scholar in ancient Alexandria, desperately trying to preserve knowledge as the great library burned. She died watching centuries of wisdom turn to ash, feeling she'd failed humanity. That failure haunted her across lifetimes. Her current obsession wasn't random, it was completion energy. her soul still trying to fulfill that ancient mission to preserve and share knowledge. Now you understand why I spend so much time on this work. Every soul
this is a message from one of my junior doctors. She sent me 3 messages every day, good morning. She's now a consultant and she's a mother because her life is changed. When I went with her to Germany, she has scoliosis, and we went for a physiotherapy center and she was treated. And the first day when we went for treatment, she came back and she could sleep without pain. And then from that, she started to believe in this type of therapy. And about the compulsion, I have compulsion of learning. Really, really, it is compulsion. All my life, I have to learn. And always, what's new, what's new, what's new? This is my compulsion. I read a lot. So I don't know why. And in my medical practice, really, really, honestly, I forget myself. Nothing. It is all with the patient. It is self-destructive. But I do that. So now I start to understand in the entanglement and in the previous things, I don't know. And it reminded me that because in history of Iraq, they said when the Mongols attack Iraq, they throw all the libraries in Baghdad in the Tigris River, and then the water became blue. So it could be the same. I feel I need to learn the wisdom and give it to others. And that's why perhaps I started the YouTube channel in COVID time. Every day I have to sit and do video. Of course I have other things to do, but no, I have to do this. So it is good that I start to understand. So I'm learning.
I mean, isn't just carrying psychological baggage, they're carrying mission memory. The universe doesn't waste experience. If you suffered through something, learned something, accomplished something in a past life, that wisdom sits in your cellular memory waiting to be activated. Think about the people obsessed with environmental collapse. Yes, current events trigger them, but dig deeper and you'll often find past lives in Atlantis, watching advanced technology destroy the ecosystem. Or lifetimes on other planets where environmental negligence ended entire civilizations. They're not just worried, they're remembering. Their soul screams, I've seen this before, and I won't let it happen again. The perfectionist who can never finish projects, often someone who died with crucial work incomplete. The person terrified of public speaking despite being brilliant, usually died for speaking truth to power. The one who hoards resources despite having plenty, starved to death in multiple lifetimes. These aren't metaphors, they're actual memory imprints bleeding through the veil. But here's what most people miss. These aren't curses, they're invitations. Your soul chose these specific challenges because it knows you're ready to transcend them. The library guardian who failed didn't incarnate as an obsessive knowledge seeker to suffer. She came back to finally complete her mission in a new way, perhaps through teaching, writing, or creating digital knowledge systems that can't burn. Every fear is a doorway. Every obsession is a signpost. Every repeated pattern is your soul saying, look here, this is what we came to heal, to complete, to transform. You're not broken, you're remembering. And remembrance is the first step toward liberation. And here's something that might shake everything you thought you knew. The people who trigger you the most, the ones who push your buttons, who seem to know exactly how to get under your skin, they're often your greatest teachers. In fact, many of them agreed to play these difficult roles before you both incarnated. I've had clients discover through regression that their most challenging parent, their betraying partner, or their cruel boss was actually a beloved soul companion who volunteered to be the catalyst for their growth. Can you imagine that level of love? To agree to be misunderstood, to be cast as the villain in someone's story, all so they could learn what they came here to learn. This doesn't mean you stay in toxic situations. It doesn't mean you excuse abuse or abandon boundaries. Understanding the soul contract doesn't require you to remain in harmful circumstances. But it does transform how you hold the experience. Instead of carrying victimhood, you can carry wisdom. Instead of harboring resentment, you can acknowledge the teaching and release the teacher. Think about the person who wounded you most deeply. What did that experience teach you about yourself, about your strength, about your boundaries, about what you will and won't accept, about compassion, perhaps even for yourself? Every adversary is a mirror. Every conflict is a revelation. They're showing you where you still need to grow, where you still need to heal, where you still need to stand in your power. And sometimes the contract isn't about learning through pain, it's about learning through joy. You contracted to experience deep love, creative expression, moments of transcendent beauty. You agreed to laugh until your sides hurt, to witness a sunset that stops your breath, to create something that moves others. We often focus so much on the difficult contracts that we forget we also signed up for the magnificent ones. You chose specific people to love. You chose passions that would set your soul on fire. You chose moments of grace that would remind you of who you truly are. You chose wounds that would crack you open, not to destroy you, but to let the light in. You chose teachers disguised as enemies, angels disguised as strangers, and miracles disguised as coincidences. And perhaps the most radical thing of all, you chose to forget. You chose amnesia. You chose to be born without the manual, without the map, without any conscious memory of the plan you so carefully crafted. Because you understood something profound. There's no growth in remembering everything. There's no courage in knowing how it all turns out. You wanted the full human experience, the uncertainty, the fear, the triumph of finding your way in the dark. You wanted to feel lost so you could experience the profound joy of being found. You wanted to doubt so you could discover faith. You wanted to break so you could rebuild yourself, stronger and more beautiful than before. This is why we call it the veil of forgetting. It wasn't punishment, it wasn't a mistake, it was the most loving choice you could make for yourself. Because if you came here remembering your true nature, remembering your power, remembering that you're an eternal being playing a temporary role, where would be the adventure? Where would be the growth? Where would be the becoming? You designed this life to challenge you, to stretch you, to force you to reach deeper than you've ever reached before. You knew that comfortable souls don't expand, safe souls don't evolve. You didn't come here to stay small. You came here to discover just how vast you truly are. And every single person in your life, you chose them too. That difficult parent who pushed all your buttons, you chose them to teach you about boundaries and self-worth. That lover who broke your heart, you chose them to show you the depths of your own capacity to feel. That friend who betrayed you, you chose them to teach you discernment. That stranger who showed you unexpected kindness, you chose them to remind you that love is everywhere. These weren't accidents. These were soul appointments. And some of these soul appointments are particularly profound. There are people in your life right now who existed in your past lives. That unexplainable comfort you feel with someone you just met. That instant recognition, that sense of I've known you forever, you have. Your soul remembers what your conscious mind has forgotten. I've regressed thousands of people, and the patterns are unmistakable. That difficult boss who pushes every button you have. In another lifetime, they were your teacher, and you asked them to challenge you again in this life. That friend who always seems to understand you without words. You walked many paths together across many centuries. The most fascinating discoveries happen when people recognize romantic partners from previous lives. But here's what surprises them: they weren't always romantic partners before. Sometimes your current spouse was your parent in another life. Sometimes they were your child. Sometimes they were your best friend who died young, and you made a soul agreement to find each other again. This is why some relationships feel so complex, so layered. You're not just dealing with this lifetime's dynamics, you're working through accumulated history, unfinished business, unresolved karma. That intensity you feel, it's recognition, it's remembrance, it's your soul saying, here we are again, ready to get it right this time. And death? Death changes everything once you understand this perspective. When someone you love dies, your conscious mind experiences profound grief. But your soul knows better. Your soul knows this isn't goodbye, it's see you later, it's intermission, not the final curtain. I've had countless sessions where people connect with loved ones who've passed, and you know what those souls always say? They're fine, they're more than fine, they're free. They're light, they're love itself, and they're waiting, not in some distant heaven, but right here, in a different frequency, watching over you, guiding you, sending you signs you usually dismiss as coincidence. That song that plays at the perfect moment, that feather that appears out of nowhere, that dream that feels too real to be just a dream. Those aren't coincidences, those are messages. Those are your loved ones reminding you that love transcends physical death. The body dies, but consciousness is eternal. And when we understand this, truly understand it in our bones, everything changes. Death becomes not an ending, but a doorway, a transition, like moving from one room to another in an infinite house. I've had so many clients ask me, Dolores, what happens in those first moments after we die? And what I've learned from thousands of sessions is this: the transition is usually peaceful, often beautiful, and sometimes surprising. Many people don't even realize they've died at first. They're still conscious, still thinking, still themselves, but suddenly they're lighter, freer. One man described it like this: it was like taking off a heavy coat I'd been wearing so long I forgot I had it on. They often see their body below them and think, oh, that's interesting. There's no panic, no fear, just curiosity. Because they quickly realize they're more alive than they've ever been. And here's what's beautiful: almost immediately they're greeted. Sometimes it's loved ones who've passed before, sometimes it's guides or beings of light. But they're never, ever alone. The universe doesn't let us stumble through this transition, confused and frightened. One woman I regressed described seeing her grandmother waiting for her, looking young and radiant. Her grandmother smiled and said, "We've been expecting you. Welcome home." Home. That's the word so many people use. They don't feel like they're going somewhere foreign. They feel like they're returning to a place they've always known. And the love they experience in those moments, it's beyond anything we can comprehend in physical terms. It's unconditional, complete, and overwhelming in the most beautiful way. Many clients have cried during regression, not from sadness, but because they've touched something so pure, so perfect, that our earthly language can't contain it. The life review comes next for many souls. And this isn't judgment from some external deity. It's us reviewing our own lives with complete honesty and compassion. We witness every moment we cause pain, but we also feel it from the other person's perspective. I've had clients gasp during regression, suddenly understanding the ripple effects of a single harsh word spoken decades ago. One woman experienced her teenage cruelty to a classmate, but this time she felt the girl's shame, her loneliness, the way that moment shaped years of insecurity. She sobbed, I never knew what I did to her. But here's what's extraordinary. Even in these moments of recognition, there's no punishment, there's learning, there's understanding. The life review isn't designed to torture us with guilt. It's designed to expand our consciousness, to help us truly comprehend the power of our choices. We also see every moment of kindness we've forgotten. That stranger we smiled at who was contemplating suicide, the friend we listened to who never told us how much it meant. The small acts of grace we dismissed as insignificant, they're all there, glowing like jewels in the tapestry of our life. Then comes the planning for the next life, and this is where it gets truly fascinating. Many souls actually volunteer for difficult circumstances. They choose physical disabilities, emotional challenges, poverty, loss, not as punishment, but as accelerated learning opportunities. I've had clients review their pre-birth planning sessions and realize they specifically requested the very circumstances they spent their entire life resenting. One man discovered he'd chosen a father with alcoholism because in his previous 7 lives, he'd struggled with compassion and patience. Another woman learned she'd selected a body prone to illness to understand vulnerability and learn to receive help, something she'd refused to do across multiple lifetimes of stubborn independence. The beings who facilitate these planning sessions, what I call the Council of Elders, don't judge these choices. They simply ask questions. Are you certain you want to experience this? Do you understand the difficulty involved? Have you considered an easier path? And almost universally, souls respond with enthusiasm. From their perspective, before birth, challenges look like thrilling opportunities for growth. It's only once we're here in the density of physical form with our memories wiped clean that these challenges feel like punishments. This is perhaps the most profound irony of human existence. We spend our lives asking, why me? When the answer is literally because you specifically requested this experience. But here's what makes this even more complex. We don't choose these challenges to suffer. We choose them to awaken. Every difficulty contains within it a specific frequency of consciousness that cannot be accessed any other way. You cannot learn genuine humility from a book. You cannot understand unconditional love through intellectual study. These frequencies must be lived, felt, experienced in the marrow of your bones. I watched this unfold dramatically with a woman who'd spent 40 years in a wheelchair following a car accident at age 23. Under hypnosis, she accessed her pre-birth planning and wept not from sadness, but from recognition. She saw herself as a soul, vibrant and eager, volunteering for this exact experience. In her previous life, she'd been a dancer who judged people with disabilities as somehow lesser, somehow broken. She'd carried that karmic imprint and specifically chosen this lifetime to experience what she'd once dismissed, to develop the compassion she'd lacked, to prove that physical limitation has nothing to do with spiritual wholeness. When she came out of the session, she said something I'll never forget. I'm not a victim of that accident. I'm a volunteer on a very specific mission. And when you hear something like that, the whole world shifts. Because suddenly, disability isn't tragedy, it's curriculum. And that woman wheeling herself through life, she's not broken. She's teaching every single person who encounters her, who has to confront their own discomfort around physical difference, who learns to see past the chair to the soul inside. They're all part of her lesson plan. She's a walking, or in her case, rolling, embodiment of spiritual truth. This is what the record showed me again and again. We don't just incarnate to work out our own karma, we incarnate to help others work out theirs. We're all teachers and students simultaneously, constantly exchanging roles in this cosmic dance of awakening. I had another client, a man who'd been abandoned by his father as a child. Textbook daddy issues, right? Spent his whole life feeling unworthy, unlovable, always seeking validation from men who couldn't give it. Classic psychology. But when we went into his past lives, we found something extraordinary. In 3 previous lifetimes, he had been the abandoner, a father who left his family for war and never returned, a husband who walked away from his responsibilities, a son who turned his back on aging parents. 3 lifetimes of choosing personal desire over commitment. And in this life, he chose to experience the other side, to feel the wound he'd inflicted, to understand viscerally what abandonment does to a soul. But here's the beautiful part. By his mid-40s, after doing this work, after understanding the pattern, he became a foster parent. He took in teenage boys that nobody else wanted, boys who'd been abandoned and rejected, and he gave them the presence his father never gave him. He transformed his deepest wound into his greatest gift. That's the alchemy of soul contracts. You transmute pain into purpose, and that's exactly what the souls reviewing his life plan knew would happen. They saw the potential not just for his suffering, but for his transformation and his service. Now, let me share something that often surprises people when they're in these sessions. When we ask the subconscious why someone chose a particularly brutal contract, maybe they were abused, maybe they watched a parent die violently, maybe they experienced something that left them shattered, the answer comes back with such calm clarity. They needed to develop compassion, or they needed to understand the darker side of human nature, or most commonly, they needed to remember their own strength. You see, between lives, we exist in a state where everything is love, where everything is light. We understand concepts intellectually, but we haven't felt them. It's like reading about swimming versus diving into the ocean. The soul knows that to truly evolve, to truly master certain frequencies of consciousness, it must experience them firsthand. I had a woman once, I'll call her Patricia, who came to me because she couldn't understand why she'd had 5 miscarriages. 5 times she'd prepared a nursery, picked out names, felt life growing inside her, only to lose it. The grief had nearly destroyed her marriage. She was angry at God, angry at the universe, angry at her own body. When we got her into that deep state and asked to speak to her higher self, the answer that came through was stunning. Those 5 souls had agreed before birth to come through just long enough to teach her specific lessons. The first one taught her that she wasn't invincible, that control was an illusion. The second taught her to lean on her husband, to let him see her vulnerability. The third taught her about the supportive community. Her friends rallied around her in ways that changed her entire social world. The fourth taught her about medical advocacy, about fighting for herself in hospital rooms. And the fifth taught her that her worth wasn't tied to motherhood, that she was complete exactly as she was. She came to understand that sometimes our greatest lessons arrive wrapped in our deepest disappointments. That the universe doesn't punish us with hardship, it refines us. Every loss became a teacher she never asked for but desperately needed. And when she finally held her daughter in her arms after years of waiting, she wasn't the same person who had started that journey. She was wiser, more compassionate, more whole. You see, the souls who plan difficult experiences aren't masochists. They're not seeking suffering for its own sake. They're seekers of accelerated growth, spiritual athletes training for the Olympics of consciousness. And here's what most people miss. Between lives, when we're reviewing our previous incarnation and planning the next one, we don't feel the pain the way we do in physical form. We see it from a higher perspective, where a 30-year struggle looks like a brief but brilliant learning opportunity. I remember working with a man named James who had lost everything in a single year. His business failed, his marriage ended, and he was diagnosed with a chronic illness that would change his life forever. Under hypnosis, his higher self explained that he had lived 7 consecutive lifetimes of material success and spiritual stagnation. He had been wealthy, powerful, respected, comfortable, and he had learned almost nothing. His soul was becoming stale, for lack of a better word. So he planned what he called the Great Leveling, a life where everything he had previously relied upon would be stripped away, forcing him to discover who he really was beneath the achievements and possessions. When he came out of that session, he was weeping, but not from sadness, from recognition. He finally understood that his worst year had been his greatest gift, that rock bottom had been the solid foundation he needed to build something authentic. And what I find fascinating is that when people finally see their suffering through this higher lens, they often discover something even more profound, that they were never actually broken. They were always whole. The suffering was just a tool that helped them remember. I worked with a woman who had been labeled with every psychiatric diagnosis you could imagine: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, borderline personality. She'd been medicated for 15 years, had been in and out of hospitals, had attempted suicide twice. When her family brought her to me, they were desperate. They'd tried everything conventional medicine had to offer. Under hypnosis, her higher self revealed something that stunned everyone in the room. She wasn't mentally ill. She was psychically wide open. She was an empath who had never learned to shield herself, absorbing the pain and trauma of everyone around her since childhood. Her mood swings were her picking up on the emotional states of others. Her paranoia was her sensing energies and entities that others couldn't perceive. Her suicide attempts were her soul's desperate cry to escape the overwhelming input she couldn't control or understand. The problem wasn't that something was wrong with her. The problem was that she was functioning at a level of sensitivity that our current medical model doesn't recognize or know how to support. Once she understood what she truly was, once she learned to protect her energy and use her gifts consciously, the symptoms that had plagued her for 15 years began to dissolve. No medication could have done what that understanding did.
I will stop because always I thought those people who are mentally sick, psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, all these symptoms which we doctors put in a book, textbook to give them the diagnosis, is these people, they are very sensitive, because I have many patients and I have a lot of experience with such people. There are some of them, they are very highly educated, very sensitive. They cannot live. They cannot everything. They are very sensitive. So what is going on in their environment make them react in this way. And about death, because I could not interrupt the video, my father on his deathbed, he was telling my mother, there are very nice people, good people are coming to visit us, so please prepare a good meal. And this is in 2000. And he said, I see flooding, so please you go at the top of the mountain. So in his deathbed, perhaps he was connecting, because in 2003 there was invasion and a lot of problems. So we decided to take all the family and took them to Syria to live, to be safe from the troubles. So this is, I will end up with this, and I think if you like it, I will continue because it is very, very interesting. And thank you and goodbye.